Hey, it's morning. Just to continue on. It's not very morose right now.
Einstein's Arrogance. In 1919, Sir Arthur Eddington led expeditions to Brazil and to the island of Prince, aiming to observe solar eclipses and thereby test an experimental prediction of Einstein's novel theory of general relativity. A journalist asked Einstein what he would do if Eddington's observations failed to match his theory. Einstein famously replied, "Then I would feel sorry for the good Lord. The theory is correct." It seems like a rather foolhardy statement, defying the trope of traditional rationality that experiment above all is sovereign. Einstein seems possessed of an arrogance so great that he would refuse to bend his neck and submit to nature's answer, as scientists must do. Who can know that the theory is correct in advance of experimental test? Of course, Einstein did turn out to be right. I try to avoid criticizing people when they are right. If they genuinely deserve criticism, I will not need to wait long for an occasion where they are wrong. And Einstein
Camping out
may
at his
not
home.
have been quite so foolhardy as he sounded. To assign more than 50% probability to the correct candidate from a pool of 100,000,000 possible hypotheses, you need at least 27 bits of evidence or thereabouts. You cannot expect to find the correct candidate without tests that are this strong, because lesser tests will yield more than one candidate that passes all the tests. If you try to apply a test that only has 1,000,000 to 1 chance of a false positive till the 20 bits, you'll end up with 100 candidates. Just finding the right answer within a large space of possibilities requires a large amount of evidence. Traditional rationality emphasizes justification. If you want to convince me of X, you've got to present me with Y amount of evidence. I myself often slip into this phrasing whenever I say something like, to justify believing in this proposition at more than 99% probability requires 34 bits of evidence. Or, in order to assign more than 50% probability to your hypothesis, you need 27 bits of evidence. The traditional phrasing implies that you start out with a hunch or some private line of reasoning that leads you to a suggested hypothesis, and then you have to gather evidence to confirm it, to convince the scientific community or justify saying that you believe in your hunch. But from a Bayesian perspective, you need an amount of evidence roughly equivalent to the complexity of the hypothesis just to locate the hypothesis in theory space. It's not a question of justifying anything to anyone. If there's 100 million alternatives, you need at least 27 bits of evidence just to focus your attention uniquely on the correct answer. Traditional rationality believes that we start off by coming up with our ideas, and then we can add evidence to confirm our hunches, such as whether the results of your experiment match your hunches. To an empirical Bayesian, hunches aren't ideas. An idea is the information on its own, the act of assembling all the ideas into a single belief. Whether that belief is more or less probable than zero is a function of the ideas that are available, and the task is somewhat algorithmic, at least if you keep track of all the knowledge in your mind and what its assignments are. This isn't knowledge of anything new. When you first ask, should I believe that X is true, you don't start from zero and work your way up to some intermediate level, which leads you to the correct answer. Instead, you use whatever information is available. That is, whatever can be accumulated as information in theory space. Whatever things you've learned, which your mind is aware of, which have arguments to whatever side on top of them. All you care about is what counts as an information that is known or provably known or ruled out, say, by assuming something that violates a law. Historically, we've understood beliefs to be functions of something that has passed through some ladder of inference. We had some knowledge assigned to it in prior that is higher up the ladder, and so our knowledge was reinforced through more positive and slash or negative information that you drew down. After receiving information confirming your belief, which is already strengthened, you finally saw an argument you like. I used this old-fashioned notion because that's how people explained what they were doing before a theory like empirical Bayesianism arose. But today's scientific journals routinely publish papers whose conclusions are 90-95% probable at best. Much less surprising discoveries involve a priori speculation about something. Certain beliefs will be taken into account but not drawn all the way through. Only those theories, empirical evidence, and observations which agree with it because to treat as false or far from correct would require a greater amount of evidence, an even higher threshold in probability than we need. And it will take on additional strength if you believe it and your collaborators believe it. In empirical Bayesianism, there's no rationalist ladder of inference. There are only sources and intersections. There's only what has been encountered so far, and there's no better argument you can see immediately, which tells you whether X is the only explanation for this or whether there's other explanations. If X is true, it has probably already occurred to you because a previously generated theory from among a large collection of them led you to conclude that it is. You do not believe in it ratiocinatively, not by reasoning as through a maze until you emerge into an area with fewer paths and emerge onto an unbelieving island of non-equivocality, one point that the Bayesian program, Deus demonstration, shares with a fine piece of jest. Traditional rationality does not derive propositional beliefs directly, as pointed out by Justin Foley and other modern rationalists. There are simply no psychological tests that are reliable for deciding whether one belief or another should be considered true. In our hypotheses, Bayesian equations cannot be applied to choose an answer with 75% confidence when your answer depends on how good you feel you've become at evaluating beliefs. When a computer predicts that its model should agree with the truth most often, that doesn't tell us if a given proposal about that model is very likely or very unlikely. Even the AI behind the curtain must tell you which answer it intends you to believe and whether it considers that answer the truth. And you, the agent, don't know yet. One's initial beliefs cannot be traced back through ladder of inference to establish any order to what happens at each level, such as starting at the very bottom as the single and very large result and gradually climbing the steps, or proceeding linearly or carefully incrementing upward according to the natural logarithm function. Unless we take into account all of that, we are missing some component of the human process. The answer isn't present at every moment in history. Traditional rationality starts off by considering one's beliefs, starting off at zero, perhaps finding another person with more experience has something to teach them, then comparing this hypothetical teacher to you to learn and apply the rules they know, comparing them to what the hypothetical teacher thinks they'd find useful, and expect to have evidence in support of it following its direction on whether the teacher is an enemy of yours. It's a path one makes through a maze of contradictory answers that line up to different destinations and wall-like distances between each juncture. They help you locate what you can get along each branch until finally on each try you finally see that some possibility was consistent and derived from itself. but there are many thousands of other paths in theory space, and there aren't actually any specific and hard rules to choose one. Maybe the particular instance is unlikely. You decide the future with uncertainty. The first outcome might have been the best the next one can be, and maybe they might learn something new next time. So then the thought becomes applied to the situation and its initial force.
Coming up. Coming up. Hold on. Okay, gonna be back soon. In a couple of minutes.